and our responses, particularly in the light of freshwater and carbon. And that's fantastic and essential, of course, but it's very easy to lose sight of a couple of things. One is that people need to be able to farm profitably, they need to be able to farm productively, and they need to be able to fit farm systems to the land and the climate and the people in a way that provides the best outcomes. And that is, and this is where I'm heading, that is a complex jigsaw puzzle. Right? It's not easy to kind of say how do we fit a farm system best to the land and everything else that goes around that. And it's very easy in today's world of sort of 20-second sound bites to look for what's the silver bullet. Oh, we just feed our cattle seaweed and we'll be right, or whatever else it might be. And we know that farm systems are complex, they have feedback loops, it's not that simple. And today we have some people in the room who have some fantastic experience and some learnings from working through farm systems in both a research and a practical way. So we're very excited to hear from those people. I'm going to invite Graham Ogle to come up now, and Graham's going to jump up and down during the day introducing people. I guess Graham has done a lot of work in recent weeks working with many of you, organising today, and on behalf of Rezare Systems, we're very grateful for that work as well. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Andrew. Rezare's been planning to run this workshop for quite some time, and it's a real pleasure to have a room full of all the people we want here for this workshop. What I want to do is just cover why we're running the workshop and a little bit about how. I think this is a chance for... Rezare's been looking for the chance to have a bit of a, and I found the word the other day, a policy refresh, a strategy refresh, sorry. Very cool word. And we thought, what better way is there to have a strategy refresh than invite all the right people, and we think you're all the right people, to a venue and talk about what we see as really valuable to farmers. What is value? What is value when we say, of all the things we can provide a farmer, what are the valuable things? I guess I started my career, my idea of that really was forged out of when I started my career in the 1980s, which meant that I had 2 decades of excruciatingly low product prices to work with for farmers. I remember sitting with a farmer one day, he was in trouble, the farm was going to get sold up, and I thought, if we get $35 a lamb, you'd be right. And of course, the markets weren't delivering that. Now, you can adjust that by whatever you like, whatever inflation index you like. The CPI would mean that farmers today would be getting $55 a lamb. And I imagine our budgeting would be even more difficult today given the increase in costs. Dairy farmers were getting $2.40 a kilo of milk solids. I mean, it's almost unheard of. And if we ramp that up by the CPI, we'd be talking about a payout today of $3.70. So this was a sort of the anvil that forged my early career, and going out to do things for farmers that were of value. The biggest value we could do for farmers then was increase their profitability, and that started to address all the other problems that were on the farm. So when Rezare set out, as we did in 2004, as a group dedicated to agricultural software development, often we sit around and think, is our strategy aligned with where the value is in the industry? Are we aligning our investment in resources where the value resides in the industry? So what we're going to do today is we're going to think, how might we align our investment with what top farmers are saying is important to them? And I can't think of any better way to start this workshop than listening to some top farmers. So that's what we're doing. I think consulting is also an extension of farming, and we'll listen to consultants after that. The farmers that we'll listen to have been through some process of change or intensive planning. And it's from those discussions that we hope you'll pick up some things about what they value. And maybe a successful outcome of this workshop is if you go home and think, hey, maybe we need a strategy refresh as well. Okay, what I'd like to introduce Blair Nelson now. I started working with Blair back in 2004, maybe. Blair had just started as one of the beef and lamb monitor farms, project farms. And you were inundated with specialists for 4 years, and Blair had a real desire to get into that top performance. Blair's Place is a very typical king country farm that has many enterprises. It has 4 main enterprises. Blair will talk about them. But these farms can have a good summer and a really poor summer. And it's just a very complex system to be keeping in track of, and pushing it into that top sort of 10%. Blair, the stand is yours. This presentation is going to be a little bit different. Blair works better if I ask him the questions, but Blair, you'll give us a bit of a outline of the farm and things first, and then I'll ask you some questions. Thank you.
So since we're involved with the beef and lamb finishing innovation farm, we've done a deal where we take alternate times of presenting, and this is I draw the short straw. You guys draw the short straw today because you've got to listen to me, not Anna, so apologies for a start. Look, we farm in partnership with my parents, so they're still involved. We've got 3 children, and they all intend to be farmers at this stage. The first one's headed in Lincoln, didn't follow us. We went through Massey, and she decided she wanted to go to the better part of the country. So that's what that one is. I guess I'm different to most of you sitting out there. I hate my computer hates me. Okay, I love my phone. The difference is my phone I can use on my farm, whether I've got coverage or not. My phone is with me the whole time. It's not in my office. If I'm on my computer, I'm stuck in my office in a dark room, and I'm not a very happy man. So doing the likes of Farmax and stuff like that, that's I have to do that. That's not my happy place. Okay, so you've got to take a little bit of all that sort of stuff with a grain of salt. So we live in an area which is in the King Country, and we're probably in a little microclimate. We get 1,500 mils a year, but we're 30 metres above sea level, so we're very hot, and by King Country standards, we're very dry. So we're unique. At the moment, our team is obviously the 4 partners, 2 permanent staff and 2 growing future farmers students, and 1 casual fencer. We also have partners with a younger couple in an equity partnership, Sheep+Beef farm. He started off working for us and came back to us 5 years later, and we've gone and invested with them, and we've since purchased another property. But for today, we're just going to focus on the farm as it was at the Innovation Farm projects, so you can see the data there. So the ewes, we are splitting, if you look at my head, I'm bald, we're splitting our flock, so I'm using bald sheep and Wiltshires, and my wife is from the South Island and very passionate family about merinos, so we're using some merino crossing. So our like Graham says, a very complicated system, so our sheep system definitely hasn't got any less complicated, it's got more complicated because we're splitting that and doing stud sheep and all sorts of funny bits and pieces, so the system's definitely not getting any simpler. Our breeding policy is reasonably simple with Angus herd. Keep all the bulls entire, sell them at 15 months of age. Heifers are a bit more flexible, so we just do that depending on what the season dictates. We've now shifted through to where we think we're going to do an AI program on our bulls, because I hate breeding bulls. Big breeding bulls hanging around is a pain in the bum, so we're heading down that line. I guess the flex in our system, because that's all breeding stock, is the bulls. So we have sort of changed the system since when we were in the program. We used a lot of winter feed, and on our heavy soils, I just don't think that's sustainable longer term. So we've morphed that, and we do a lot more sales and purchases is how we use that flexibility. So either sale date or purchase date. So obviously on the slide you can see the objectives for the main objectives for the project. It really was that it was at the time of the project everybody around us was converting. We've got probably 300 hectares in the middle of our farm that would make a nice dairy farm. A little bit heavy, so not ideal, but we'd have a reasonably tidy dairy farm right in the middle, but our sheep beef farm would be shit. So we really wanted to avoid that, and so we challenged ourselves to make enough money not to have to do it, and set about doing that. Obviously through, but mostly through the project was on feeding our precision nutrition, basically, feeding our ewes better to be able to get better performance out of them, and the bulls. So we were supposed to be really targeted to that. But it's a system, so every time we pulled that lever, it just threw the whole rest we ended up changing the whole lot. So it was like, but you're supposed to be doing this part. It's like, you can't do this part. It flows through your whole system. And I guess that was the biggest learning out of it, was every time we pulled another lever, it affected another part of our system. And that was, we had to really work on getting through that. I guess this next slide is something that Graham pulled out of the booklet. So part of the project, we had to produce a booklet every year, basically with a whole lot of figures. So we had that much data everywhere, and then they'd come through and say they want to present something in a field day, and they would say what they wanted, and then I'd have to go back through my records and pull out all the figures, and they'd analyse them effectively. So we just got, we had 3 passionate, an agronomist, an systems analyst, and another system analyst, basically, I think, and they just, anything they wanted to measure, they just got us, and we said, we didn't say no to measuring anything, basically, for that 3-year period. So everything came there, and there was just data for Africa. I guess if you look at the table, we obviously had goals, and we basically achieved most of those within the 2 to 3 years. Have we maintained them? Maybe not quite so much. We've changed our system a lot since then, but I guess if you look at the likes of the lamb's growth rates, compare ours to Fraser's, we achieved 220 grams. That was on, supposed to be on a plantain clover-based system, but when you looked at it, it was really just plantain. The plantain just comes away in the King Country way too fast. The clover's too slow to slabbish, and then we had moths and things like that. So, look, we thought we might. Every time I kept standing up in front of the group and saying we thought we were going to solve it through this crop or this thing, like it actually was the system that saved our bums, not the specific crop that we did. It was the analysing the ewes and that monitoring of what we were doing was actually saving us, not the magic crop. We thought it was going to be a magic crop that was going to save our bacon when we started it. We'd been down to Fraser's and had a look at that, and it was pretty amazing what they're doing with lucerne, and Graham thought we could do it with red clover and plantain, and it wasn't. It was just actually getting back to basics for us. So this is pretty typical of the graph that we produced during the day. So to give you an idea, that it's condition score of our ewes at weaning. So obviously,
this is an important time for you, isn't it? The weaning to tupping.
well, so it's that whole thing. The farming is a whole cycle. Whenever it flows from one season to another, and we never. So where do we start and where do we stop? So Graham sort of said you've got to have a point in time that you say this is where the cycle starts and stops. So he's made me say weaning to tupping is where it starts. It's not because it's just carries on. You never actually get from one to the other because it flows through. But Graham said here's your start date. So he's saying that at weaning, condition score of our ewes is is a point to start from. And so effectively when we're doing a project, that graph took us 2 days worth of data to collect. Okay, that's in essence how much data went into that. The bottom hump says that the U's were the condition score between under 3. The middle line is from 3 to 3.5, and the top line is basically the ones that are over 4. So what it did was, the first time we went through it, we were horrified. We had 30 to 40% of our U's that the graph doesn't quite represent it because obviously it's further down the track. 30 to 40% of the U's were under that condition score when we went. And so I guess he wanted to explain how we manage those. So the light U's, before the project started, we probably bolused them at set stocking. We probably drenched them quite a lot. Now we really just manage them all the way through the season and then sell them out. The middle line, we just maintenance feed them, and if you're in the top mob, you became on Jenny Craig. And we probably took us 2 or 3 years to really figure out that we had to be quite ruthless to get a fat ewe to become back to being a productive ewe. It was quite a little bit scary how hard you had to manage them. I guess the point is that we learned how to manage them. We had a whole lot of data, and the analysts of the data said that we should get rid of those lighter ewes. We could feed some of them up, but predominantly they were repeat offenders, and we could get rid of them. So, is that?
Yeah. So what I was kind of interested in there is you had a sort of a pre-project mode, and then you thought we can't live here. We've got to get involved in getting a bit more performance. So you had it during the project mode. And then you've had a sort of after the project mode where you've sort of settled back to what you think is sort of because we did the 100%. What you're doing now is the 80-20.
Yeah.
So can you just sort of explain to us the things that you consider now still sit in that high priority 80-20? What tasks do you do that you still now think are really important, even after you've sort of maybe pegged back at it?
Okay. Can I answer that in a slightly different way, Graham? I'll use the example of scanning. So when we started the project, before we started the project, scanning, we used to scan for mould pools. When we got into the project, we started scanning. We still scan for number of lambs, but we fetal aged, and for three fetal ages, and we recorded all that data as we went through. So, and then we managed those ewes as they came out of the scanning. So they came out and their number of lambs mobs, their fetal age mobs, and then we managed them through set stocking. So we've got sunny country versus northerly country versus southerly country. So the early lambers went on that country and went through like that. So we collected a whole lot of EID information and all that. The reality is we still do now. That's one of the things that we've retained. So we still fetal age, we still scan, but we just use colours on our ewes, because then we can go through the 7 satellite yards, we can draft manually, and I can actually look at them and see what they are. The staff can all look at them and see what they are. If it's on an EID, it's hidden away somewhere. Someone's got to go and find it, and I'm just not that type of guy, like I say. So it's much easier if I can visualise it, I can see it, the guys can see it, they can understand what the marks are, they're in the yards, they can see it coming through, and then it's all visual for me. So I like that visual thing, I like to be able to see it. So that's, I guess there's lots and lots of examples like that, Graham, of what we did in the project, and all we've tried to do is take it back to what works for us, how we can short circuit it. So condition scoring, so we did it 4 times a year, we EID'd, and then we ran the numbers, and Dave loved numbers, so he had a pivot table and he sorted it all out. And the reality is that if we keep our condition score ewes close enough, do it at weaning and straight off, we happen to shears in January, so straight off the shears. If we draft them on those mobs straight off the shears, I can do it without putting my hand on every ewe. And if I draft on a regular basis, I can keep the condition score reasonably close to and within, I think, acceptable margins without having to go through all of that, each individual animal. So I've sort of short-circuited it and made it faster. We're probably a little bit more ruthless about those light ewes, so they get out and they get out of the system totally. So does that answer that question, sort of?
Yeah. Isn't this always the way? Someone gives you a microphone and you've got to work out how to switch it on. It is on. Yeah. Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah. So what? At the end of the day, what did you have to really do to get that? One of the big hard bits of the project we thought was getting weaning weight up so that we could pull our sale date back, so that you weren't selling lamb, trying to finish lambs in March when we know that your property, the feed quality then's at its very lowest. So what did you have to get right? Just the few things you had to get right to get the lambs you wanted at weaning?
Yep, so I guess that comes down to that. We identified that starting cover, same thing, picking a point in time, because it's a whole ramification of things, but we picked the point in time was set stocking, the amount of cover we had on set stocking and how much feed we were going to have from there available for them through to weaning was the key driver. There was a whole lot of lead up to that, but effectively that was the point that we drove Farmex. We drove all our measuring and monitoring through to that point in time. So that meant that we needed to know and that was probably the difference between when we started the project was I was doing Farmex, but I always had and it might be worth actually pulling up the next slide, I always had that little red thing in the spring. And I didn't worry too much about that because I'd deal with that when I got to the spring. Whereas Graham was like, hold on, you need to make sure that is feasible the whole way through the project. And that was a big change for me. I was running Farmex, but I just accepted that at that point in time, I don't know whether you understand. So the bottom one here is basically what my demand is. The top one is my supply. And this piece here says that I can't do what I'm supposed to do. I've set the targets there and it's saying I can't do, so I'm compromising somewhere in there. And this other dot is the other interesting part. So here, I'm supposed to be in the green, so he's doing a nice little guide to get in there, and I'm sitting here. So we're sitting here with what decisions are we going to make so that I can get back to be here for, we've said this is average cover for, that's the driver, is that cover, to have the cover in that range at set stocking, and so we had to measure all that stuff to make that happen. So does that, I'm a little bit lost, but I was... that answers it really well. Just to explain that more, the dotted green line is the cover, and the red line is the cover you need to meet all of your livestock targets. So that's the kind of cool thing that Farmex does. And it just took us consultants to a new level. We didn't have to try and sort of intuitively think, wow, I hope you'll make it through spring, I think you will. It just tells you. And so you can say to someone like, Blair, we've got to do something. So that first year, I can still remember it well, we wanted that cover. Were you surprised at the things we had to do to get it? I was pissed, probably, is a polite way to say it. We sat in the paddock a year later and I'd done Farmex and I'd done everything that I asked and we'd worked my butt off. I really thought I'd pulled a lot of leaves and thought I'd been a really good student and worked really hard. And I can remember sitting there and there was 100 cover more and they were saying, you've done well. And I said, mate, when I do pasture covers, I'm more than 100 out. I can't guarantee that this isn't exactly the same as the 100 we had last year. So have I actually gained anything at all? And that's what annoyed me we'd done all this, we're pretty precise. And in reality, we must have had 100 cover because performance reflected it later on. But at that point in time, I can just remember being so disappointed, so angry that we'd done all this work and we're in the same place within 100, but I guess I didn't. In hindsight, that is the difference between hitting all our targets and missing is 100 cover, which is why I hate Farmex, because it's always right and it says the green lines, red's there, so I'm a very angry man on my computer again.
So what was interesting, and Blair over the project just got more and more confidence with Farmex, but that red there is, I explained to Blair, was why we're not reaching our weaning weight targets, because we're not fully feeding ewes through lactation. Blair, tell us about this cover measurement. Is it something you enjoy? Do you enjoy getting out there and measuring every paddock on the farm? And how long does it take you to do it well, and how?
Okay, so the answer is no, it's probably not right up in there. It's a bit like my computer. I enjoy the drive around, but I don't like having to do it. I'm imprecise. It takes me at least a day. And yeah, I guess it's not just the cover. It takes me a day to do that. The weighing the cattle is probably 2 days worth of weighing. To monitor the sheep, and that's another 2 days. So there's 5 days worth of work there for us to really come around and make that run. And I really quite like building fences and doing a few other bits and pieces along the way. So it's quite hard work for me, Graham. But I guess obviously the accuracy is one thing, which is a big issue in my business, I guess. And it's surprising how many farmers you talk to that don't necessarily do it to the same level of degree, but are interested in what their cover is, if that makes sense. We are, at the end of the day, allocators of feed. And I guess, yeah.
So Blair, I just finishing up, what would be, if this industry was investing millions of dollars like it does in trains to Auckland and things like that, what would be the kind of ideal system for you? What would be some of the ideal attributes of that system that would make your life easier? And
I hate double entry. So I use the example of we weigh our cattle, then we have to put our numbers into some form of feed budget or stock numbers at the end of the month. We then have to put that into some form of feed budget, either Excel or FarmX. Then we've got to do it into Overseer. We've got to do it into financial account package. We've got to do it for Environment Waikato into Overseer. So by the time you've put the same number into 6 computer programs, you're pretty well sick of that. So if we could get rid of the double entry out of the system, that would be got a blessing in disguise. And I had another one. Mapping, having three to 5 mapping systems in New Zealand that are owned by us as farmers or by someone else that invested in it for us as farmers, that just drives me barney as well. And I had another one, which
pasture cover, right?
Pasture covers would be one. Yep, being able to have that turn up on my desk straight away and know what that would be pretty awesome. Only working on my phone, which was what I sort of said in the first part. There was something else ahead.
Automatic weighing.
We need to clear up the lambs and their dams.
Yeah. No, sorry, I've forgotten what the last point was, Graham. I've got it somewhere, but yeah. The pairing up. We think that pairing up lambs to dams will be as big a step forward for the industry as what scanning was. If we can do that on as a commercial farmers, I do believe that is the next step forward for a real basic farmer. Not this level farmer, but even just the real basic farmers. Most of them now scan. If they had the data of what that lamb actually produced off that ewe, I think that would revolutionise the sheep industry.
I agree. Well, thanks very much, Blair.
So I guess, stand in front of the microphone, just a few reflections on the day, and I'll keep this brief. So the first thing I thought about was the messages from our practitioners in the morning sessions. So the farmers and the people who are working closely with farmers. And they talked about, unashamedly stolen from your slides, folks, people, planet, performance. And I've just kind of expanded those out a bit more. We talked about the importance of people, and I think we've reflected on that during the day. There were questions about what's stopping data interoperability, and the answer was people. There were questions about how do we get adoption. We talked about the need for specialists. And so a lot of it comes back to the importance of people in our thinking. Mathematical equations are great, but people are very important. Planet, we've talked about the need to make sure that we're farming within the constraints that we've got and doing the right things for our land and our planet. performance, and I've added and productivity there. And Martin's questions are good ones. We want to include. We know we often fall into talking about improving production, right? And we know we don't want to talk about improving production. We want to talk about improving productivity, the measure of what we're getting out, and the bottom line measure of that is profit, as long as the other factors are equal for the amount of inputs put in and for the amount of emissions going out. Then something that I got out of those farmers who talked this morning is their strong emphasis on planning, on the processes that they and their teams follow, the communication of those processes, and the precision with which they go and measure. They identify what are the important things for them to measure in their systems, and they go and measure them. And together that was talked about as systematisation, turning things into a system that's repeatable, and I think that's key. So some great learnings for me in those areas today. We talked, for those who are involved in research and in governance, we talked about capabilities, and I guess my reflection thinking about some of the presentations was the amount of amazing capability that we've had leveraged in this sector over many years in our science R&D and all of the things that underpin that. Some fantastic capability, and I think that goes to the heart of what you were talking about before, Graham. Other countries are investing in their core competencies, and in New Zealand we've made a lot of investment, not enough, but a lot of investment in building capability in pastoral agriculture and its underpinnings, which has been fantastic. There's some really valuable collections. We talked about the virtual climate stations, we talked about S-maps, and we've talked about some of the other collections that are out there. I didn't want to just say databases because there's a lot more than just databases. Almost every speaker talked about the opportunity to collaborate further, to engage further, to use data from other sources, whether that's climate stations or soils data or any of the other data sets that are potential to use, and the opportunity to engage together. And we see that in some of the collaborative projects that have been done. We talked a little bit about data integration, and to me there's some real benefits in being able to link data and to have common identifiers and all of those necessary things that make it easier to connect the dots between systems, and also consistency in meaning and interpretation, and are we talking about the same things? And then this afternoon we talked about I'm playing some fun games here, but we talked a little bit about sensing. We started off by talking from space, which is very much built on sensing technologies. But I thought, particularly when I was listening to Dean as well, that's another great example of sourcing data so that farmers aren't having to go and measure it. Imagine if you as a farmer, and farmers did have to do this, some still do, go and attend every sale yard that they can so that they know what the prices are. Try and keep their own little book so that they know, where prices are heading. But there are tools that can deliver that data just as space can deliver pasture cover data. And I think we saw through the work that Ravensdown and Balance are doing a bunch of other sensing and use of predictive tools to take some of the effort that farmers would have out of sort of capturing data and making sense of it. A lot of the tools we looked at, including FarmMax and including the tools that Ravensdown and Balance have been working on, have been around making predictions that help people make either recommendations or decisions, and that's really powerful. And I think there's been a thread of discussion going through around, well, how do we then extend those services out? If you've got other crops you want to measure with space, how do you do that? Can we extend those services? If you've got some data that's in FarmMax or one of these other tools, how do we make it available? How do we make data flow into FarmMax? I think my other observation is that we're still at the stage where many of these tools, maybe space being an exception here, require the assistance of somebody, a specialist, to help interpret them, right? Whether that's a rep or an agri-manager in a fertiliser company, and we know there's good reasons why we should be doing that, or a consultant to help you with Farm Max. And I'm not saying, we know those roles are essential and important, but if we're to move to support for adoption and use, we need to think about how we kind of leverage the time of those people, right? So that they're doing the things that only they can do, and that our tools and our systems are easier to use, so that specialists don't have to get involved at every step in the way. So I guess that's my kind of reflections on what we've talked about today. I hope that, like me, this has been of interest to you, that you've had your eyes opened to some interesting things that people have been doing and some opportunities. I think it's been great to have the input from the farmers and the practitioners to kind of ground truth what the problems are that we're trying to solve. And what we're hoping is that this conversation continues on. So if you're on Zoom or if you're here in the room, hopefully you've made some contacts or you've made some notes of people you should talk to, and we'd really encourage you to continue to do that. If there's any way that Rezare can facilitate those discussions for you, we're happy to do that as well. So thank you very much.